What I'm about to tell you is going to completely upend everything your doctor, your nutritionist, your neighbor, and probably every health magazine you've ever read has told you about blood pressure. For decades, you've been handed one single instruction: cut the salt, watch your sodium, put the salt shaker away. And millions of seniors across this country have done exactly that. They've eaten bland food, they've read every label, they've given up the things they love, and their blood pressure? Still high, still climbing, still dangerous. I'm Dr. Sandra Whitmore, and I've been a cardiologist for 23 years. And I need to tell you something today that very few doctors are talking about, even though the research is sitting right there. Published, peer-reviewed, impossible to ignore. There is something that is raising your blood pressure more than salt. Something tiny. Something that most of you are consuming every single day, often while thinking you're making a healthy choice. And the most dangerous part? It hides. It doesn't taste salty. It doesn't look like a problem. It disguises itself as harmless, even heart-healthy, and it is quietly, systematically pushing your blood pressure numbers up, sometimes by 8, 10, 15 points, without you ever suspecting it. Before we get into what this is and why it's doing this to your body, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. Your heart health may literally depend on what you learn here. And share this video right now before you forget. Because what I'm going to reveal in the next few minutes could explain why your blood pressure refuses to cooperate despite everything you've been doing right. Let me start with what you already know, because we need to be honest about it before we move forward. Salt does raise blood pressure. That is not a lie. It is real. Sodium causes your body to hold on to water. That extra fluid increases the volume of blood moving through your arteries. More volume means more pressure. The relationship is real, and we've known it for a long time. But here's what almost nobody explains properly. Salt doesn't raise blood pressure equally in everyone. Research shows that roughly 60% of people with high blood pressure are what we call salt sensitive, meaning their blood pressure responds strongly when they increase or decrease sodium, but that leaves 40%, a full 4 out of 10, for whom salt reduction produces, very modest results. Maybe a 3 to 5 point drop, sometimes less, sometimes nothing at all. So what's happening to those people? They're suffering. They're restricting a whole food group, they're eating food with no flavor, they're being told they must not be trying hard enough, and the whole time, the real driver of their hypertension is sitting right on their breakfast table, invisible, unchallenged, and doing enormous damage. This is the story I need to tell you today. Not to dismiss salt, but to expand your understanding, because if you only fight one enemy when there are 2, 3, or even 4, you will never win the battle. Let me tell you about Barbara. Barbara was 71, retired schoolteacher, devoted to her health in a way that was honestly, inspiring. When her doctor told her 3 years ago that her blood pressure was too high, she attacked the problem with everything she had. She threw away the salt shaker. She bought low-sodium soups, low-sodium crackers, low-sodium everything. She read every nutrition label at the grocery store. She stopped eating at restaurants because she couldn't control the sodium. She tracked her sodium intake every single day and stayed well below the recommended 1,500 milligrams. She was doing everything right, everything by the book. Her blood pressure, 3 years later, still 152/94. Her doctor added a second medication. She still felt terrible. She was frustrated, confused, and honestly starting to lose hope. When she came to see me, I didn't look at her sodium intake first. I asked her to write down everything she ate and drank for a full week. Every meal, every snack, every drink, every condiment. When she brought me that log, I looked at it carefully, and I immediately saw what her previous doctors had missed entirely. Barbara's breakfasts were, in her words, heart-healthy. Half a cup of orange juice, a bowl of oatmeal with a little honey and a banana, sometimes a flavored yogurt that said light on the label. Her afternoons included a small granola bar for energy, maybe some crackers with a spread. Her evenings featured plenty of vegetables and lean protein, but often with a little ketchup or barbecue sauce on the side. To Barbara, this looked like a clean, healthy diet, low in sodium, high in good intentions. But here's what was actually happening inside her body, and this is where I need you to pay very close attention. Barbara was consuming, on average, between 18 and 22 teaspoons of added sugar every single day. Not because she was eating candy bars or drinking soda, because the foods she believed were healthy were saturated with it. That light-flavored yogurt had 4 to 5 teaspoons of added sugar per serving. The orange juice had nearly the same as a can of soda in terms of fructose load. The granola bar had 3 teaspoons. The ketchup, the barbecue sauce, the honey in the oatmeal, the crackers, it was adding up. Every bite, every meal, every day. And that sugar was doing something to her arteries that no amount of salt restriction was going to fix. The science. Why sugar raises blood pressure. Before I tell you what happened with Barbara, I need to explain the mechanism. Because once you understand how sugar raises blood pressure, you will never look at a seemingly innocent food the same way again. When you eat added sugar, particularly a type of sugar called fructose, which is 1/2 of table sugar and the main component of high fructose corn syrup, your body processes it very differently from other carbohydrates. Most carbohydrates are processed in your muscles and throughout your body. Fructose is processed almost entirely in your liver, and that metabolic process triggers a cascade of reactions that directly affect your blood pressure through not just one pathway, but several. Here's the first pathway. When fructose is metabolized in your liver, it rapidly produces something called uric acid as a byproduct. Now, most people associate uric acid with gout, with painful joints. And yes, that's one of its effects. But here's what matters for your blood pressure. Uric acid directly inhibits the production of a molecule called nitric oxide inside your blood vessels. Nitric oxide is your body's natural blood pressure medication. It's produced inside the walls of your arteries. It tells those arteries to relax, to widen, to allow blood to flow freely and easily. When you have enough nitric oxide, your blood vessels stay flexible and open. Your blood pressure stays controlled. When fructose-driven uric acid shuts down nitric oxide production, your blood vessels begin to constrict. They tighten, they stiffen. Blood has to push harder to move through those narrowed passages. Your heart has to work harder to push it through. And, your blood pressure goes up. Not because you ate too much salt, because you depleted your body's most powerful natural mechanism for keeping blood pressure in check. But that's only the first pathway. Here's the second, and this one is particularly important for seniors. When you consume large amounts of added sugar consistently, your body begins to develop insulin resistance. This means your cells stop responding properly to insulin. Your pancreas has to produce more and more insulin to do the same job. And here's the critical connection to blood pressure that most people never hear about. Elevated insulin causes your kidneys to retain sodium and water. The higher the insulin, the more sodium stays trapped in your body. The more sodium retained, the higher your blood pressure climbs. Here's the painful irony. You restrict salt. You do everything right. But if your insulin is elevated because of sugar, your kidneys are holding on to whatever sodium you do consume, plus more. The sugar is making you salt sensitive even when you're restricting salt. You are fighting a sodium battle while sugar is undermining you from behind. And the third pathway, perhaps the most insidious, is this. Fructose directly activates certain sodium and chloride transporters in your kidneys and intestines. It's almost as if eating fructose tells your body to absorb more sodium from everything you eat. High sugar intake doesn't just raise blood pressure through its own effect. It amplifies the effect of every gram of salt you consume. It turns your kidneys against you. Research in older adults has found that higher sugar intake is associated with raising systolic blood pressure by 7.6 points and diastolic blood pressure by 6.1 points. And here's the comparison that should stop you in your tracks. A standard low-salt diet in salt-sensitive individuals typically produces a 3 to 5 point reduction in blood pressure. Sugar in the same population is adding 7 to 8 points. We are fighting with one hand while being hit with two. Now let me tell you about Robert. Robert was 69. He was a retired electrician from Georgia. He came to see me because his blood pressure was persistently 158/96, even on medication. Like Barbara, he had been told his whole life to watch his salt. He was a disciplined man. He followed instructions. He hadn't used a salt shaker in 4 years. He avoided processed meats, canned soups, fast food, salty snacks. From a sodium perspective, he was doing remarkably well. But Robert had a habit that was so deeply woven into his daily life that nobody had ever thought to question it. Robert drank sweet tea. Not one glass. He drank sweet tea the way most people drink water, 4, sometimes 5 large glasses a day from morning to night. He made it the old-fashioned Southern way, with a full cup of sugar for every gallon. Each glass he poured himself contained somewhere between 3 and 4 teaspoons of sugar. He was consuming between 12 and 20 teaspoons of added sugar per day through sweet tea alone. He didn't think of it as sugar. He thought of it as refreshment, as tradition, as something that has nothing to do with his heart. I asked Robert one simple question. What would happen if we replaced the sweet tea with unsweetened tea for 30 days and kept everything else exactly the same? He was skeptical. He told me it was going to make no difference. He tried it anyway. 22 days later, he called my office. His blood pressure at home was a 134/82, 24 points lower. From removing sweet tea. We didn't change his medication. We didn't change his diet in any other way. We didn't touch his salt. One change, one source of daily hidden sugar. Gone. And his blood pressure responded in a way that years of salt restriction had never achieved. Robert's story teaches us something critical. The source matters. The delivery mechanism matters. Liquid sugar, particularly from sweetened beverages, is metabolized rapidly and generates the fructose-uric acid-nitric oxide chain reaction almost immediately. Research shows that people who regularly consume sweetened beverages have significantly elevated blood pressure compared to those who don't, independent of all other dietary factors, and the effect is dose-dependent. The more, the worse. Now here is where this gets complicated, and this is the part that truly infuriates me about the way we talk to patients about nutrition. When most people try to reduce sugar, they think about the obvious things. The candy, the cookies, the cake, the soda, and they cut those out and feel virtuous. But the added sugar that's actually doing the most damage to blood pressure isn't coming from things that taste like dessert. It's hiding in plain sight, in the foods that our culture has labeled as healthy, as heart-smart, as good for you. Consider this. A single tablespoon of ketchup, just 1 tablespoon, contains roughly a teaspoon of sugar. Most people use 3 or 4 tablespoons at a meal. A serving of bottled pasta sauce, the kind from a jar that says Garden Fresh on the label, can have 4, 5, even 6 teaspoons of added sugar per cup. Barbecue sauce is one of the most concentrated sugar vehicles in the American kitchen, with some brands containing 2 full teaspoons per tablespoon. But the biggest culprit, the one that surprises seniors most, is yogurt. Flavored low-fat yogurt has been marketed for decades as a heart-healthy, calcium-rich breakfast option, and it can have 5 to 6 teaspoons of added sugar per single serving container. Breakfast cereal, granola, energy bars, low-fat salad dressings, multigrain bread. These are the foods people eat believing they are protecting themselves, and they are consuming sugar in amounts that would shock them if they saw the equivalent in table sugar piled on their kitchen counter. Here is a simple test I give my patients. For 1 week, write down everything you eat and drink. Then go online and look up the added sugar content of each item. Add up your daily total in teaspoons. Most of my patients, when they do this exercise, come back genuinely shaken because they discover they are consuming between 15 and 30 teaspoons of added sugar per day, often while believing they eat clean and healthy. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day for women and 9 teaspoons for men. Most Americans are consuming 2 to 4 times that. And for seniors with blood pressure challenges, every extra teaspoon is another hand on the dial turning your pressure upward. I want to tell you about Carol now. Carol was 74. She was one of those incredibly thoughtful patients who kept meticulous notes and arrived at every appointment prepared. But Carol had a pattern that nobody had connected to her blood pressure, and when we finally saw it, everything made sense. Carol's blood pressure was worst in the mornings. Her readings first thing upon waking were consistently 162/97. By evening, they had dropped to 138/84. Her doctors had discussed something called morning surge, which is normal. Blood pressure does rise upon waking, but Carol's morning surge was extreme, far beyond what it should have been. When I reviewed her health history, I noticed something. Carol had chronic insomnia. She had struggled with it for years. She averaged between 5 and 5.5 hours of sleep per night. She thought this was just a fact of aging, something she had accepted and moved on from. She had never connected it to her blood pressure because nobody had ever told her to. But here's what was happening inside Carol's body every single night. When you sleep fewer than 7 hours, your body increases its production of stress hormones, particularly cortisol and adrenaline, to compensate for the deprivation. These hormones are vasoconstrictors. They narrow blood vessels. They increase heart rate. They tell your kidneys to hold on to sodium. All of this drives blood pressure up. But during normal sleep, your blood pressure dips, often by 10 to 20%. This dip is called nocturnal dipping, and it is incredibly important for the health of your heart and arteries. It's the period of rest and recovery that your cardiovascular system needs every single night. When you don't get enough sleep, you lose that dip. Your blood pressure stays elevated through the night. Your heart and arteries never get their recovery window, and they wake up already exhausted, already strained, already elevated, and they carry that elevation into the day. Research has shown that people sleeping less than 5 hours per night have nearly double the risk of developing high blood pressure compared to those sleeping 7 or 8 hours. That is not a minor association. That is a doubling of risk. We worked with Carol on sleep hygiene, consistent bedtime, reducing screen exposure after 7 p.m., no caffeine after noon, a cool, dark room, a simple relaxation routine. Over 6 weeks, her average sleep climbed to just over 6.5 hours, and her morning blood pressure dropped to 139/82, nearly 23 points, without changing a single medication, without touching her diet. By giving her body the nightly cardiovascular recovery it had been starved of for years. What Carol's story reveals is this: blood pressure does not exist in isolation from the rest of your life. It is a number that reflects everything your body is experiencing. And if one of the biggest drivers of that number is something nobody asked you about, something like sleep, or what I'm about to tell you next, then no amount of medication or salt restriction is going to fix it. Now I need to tell you about something that is deeply, personally difficult for me to discuss with my patients, because it touches something that goes beyond biology. It touches life itself. Let me tell you about James. James was 67. He had retired at 65 from a career he loved as an engineer. 2 years before he came to see me, he had lost his wife of 41 years. They had built their whole life together, their social world, their routines, their reasons to cook a real meal, to keep the house warm, to stay engaged. All of it had been built around each other. And when she was gone, James didn't just lose his wife. He lost his entire daily structure and most of his social contact. James ate well. He had always been active. He watched his salt with genuine discipline. He exercised 3 days a week because his wife would have wanted him to. But his blood pressure was 161/99, and nothing was bringing it down. When I spent more time with James, what emerged was a portrait of profound loneliness. He had gone from days filled with shared meals, conversation, laughter, and mutual purpose to days that were largely silent. He ate alone. He watched television alone. He spoke to his son by phone once a week. He left the house 2 or 3 times a week, mainly to grocery shop. Here is what the research tells us, and this is something every senior needs to hear. Social isolation and loneliness are not just emotional conditions. They are physiological ones. Chronic loneliness triggers a sustained state of low-grade threat in the nervous system. Your body, which evolved over millions of years to detect danger, interprets the absence of social connection as a survival threat, and in response, it does what it always does when threatened. It activates your stress response system. It elevates cortisol. It increases inflammation throughout the vascular system. It stiffens your arteries. Here is something that the research makes abundantly clear, but that rarely gets communicated to patients in a way that sticks. Blood pressure control is not just about how much sodium you eat. It's about the balance between sodium and potassium. Potassium acts directly on the walls of your blood vessels, helping them relax and remain flexible. It also signals your kidneys to excrete more sodium in urine, effectively flushing excess sodium out of the system. Without adequate potassium, sodium's pressure-raising effects become amplified, Even a modestly elevated sodium intake becomes dangerous when potassium is severely deficient. The sodium to potassium ratio in the body has been shown to be more strongly associated with blood pressure outcomes than either sodium or potassium alone. You can restrict salt to near zero, but if your potassium is depleted, your blood pressure will continue to struggle. You have removed one side of the problem while leaving the other side completely unaddressed. And here's why seniors are particularly vulnerable. Potassium-rich foods tend to be foods that seniors often reduce or eliminate from their diets for various reasons. Fresh vegetables can be harder to prepare with arthritic hands. Fruits get avoided over sugar fears. Legumes can cause digestive discomfort. The result is that many seniors who are diligently watching sodium are simultaneously, inadvertently, depleting the mineral that is supposed to protect them. We worked with Dorothy on potassium restoration. More greens, cooked spinach, which is easy to prepare and very high in potassium, sweet potatoes, white beans, a small amount of plain low-fat yogurt, avocado. Over 8 weeks, her blood pressure stopped climbing and dropped to 132/82. The same slow climb reversed, not by cutting more sodium, but by giving her body the mineral partner that makes sodium management actually work. Now, I want you to take a step back and see the complete picture, because this is where everything we've discussed becomes truly powerful. I've been in cardiology long enough to have seen this pattern hundreds of times. And every time I identify the real driver, every time I address the actual cause rather than just the number, the transformation in the patient is remarkable. Not just in blood pressure, in energy, in mood, in engagement with life. Because the things that drive blood pressure high are often the same things that drain vitality across every dimension of health. So let me give you something concrete. Not just information, but action. This is what I want you to do, starting today. First, do the sugar audit. For 7 days, write down everything you eat and drink. Then look up the added sugar content. Count it in teaspoons. 1 teaspoon equals 4 grams on a nutrition label. When you have your daily average, compare it to the limit of 6 teaspoons for women and 9 teaspoons for men. If you are over that limit, identify your top 2 or 3 sources of sugar and eliminate or dramatically reduce them. Start there. That single change can drop your blood pressure by 6 to 8 points within weeks. Second, identify your liquid sugars first. Sweet tea, fruit juice, flavored coffee drinks, sports drinks, vitamin waters, flavored sparkling waters with added sugar. These are the most biologically potent sources of fructose because they are absorbed rapidly, generate the uric acid cascade quickly, and most people don't account for them as sugar consumption at all. Replacing just 2 sweetened drinks per day with water or plain unsweetened tea can have a measurable impact on blood pressure within 30 days. Third, tackle the hidden sugars. Look at your condiments, your yogurts, your sauces, your breakfast cereals, your granola bars. Buy plain yogurt and add your own fruit. Make your own tomato sauce with whole tomatoes. Look for condiment brands with no added sugar. Read labels specifically for the words added sugars on the nutrition facts panel, because that number now, thanks to updated label rules, appears separately from naturally occurring sugars. Fifth, address isolation honestly. Ask yourself, when did I last have a meaningful in-person conversation with someone I care about? When did I last laugh genuinely with another person? If the answer is unsettling, treat it like the medical risk factor it is. Join one activity, one group, one weekly gathering. Not because you're supposed to be cheerful, because your cardiovascular system requires social engagement the way it requires oxygen. This is not soft advice. This is physiology. Sixth, think potassium. Add 1 potassium-rich food to every meal. Cooked spinach, a piece of fruit, half an avocado, a serving of white beans or lentils, sweet potato. This does not mean counting milligrams. It means intentionally building potassium into your daily food choices as deliberately as you currently avoid sodium, because the balance between these 2 minerals may be more important than the absolute level of either. And seventh, take all of this information to your doctor. Not as a criticism of what they've told you before, but as an addition. Your doctor can only work with what they know about your life. If they don't know you're eating 22 teaspoons of sugar a day from heart-healthy foods, if they don't know you're sleeping 5 hours, if they don't know you've been eating alone for 2 years, they cannot address those factors. You have to bring your full life into the conversation. We made 3 changes. We replaced her flavored yogurt with plain yogurt and added fresh berries. We eliminated the daily orange juice and replaced it with water and a piece of whole fruit. We removed the sweetened condiments. We made no other changes. No new medications. No further sodium restriction. And we talked about sleep, which she had been struggling with, and helped her establish a real nighttime routine. 6 weeks later, Barbara's blood pressure was 131/82. For the first time in 3 years, her blood pressure was in a range we were comfortable with. She wasn't on maximum dose medications anymore. She was eating food she actually enjoyed, and she looked at me across the table and said something I will never forget. She said, "All those years avoiding salt, I never once thought to look at the sugar." And that's exactly why I made this video. Because the information you need to protect yourself is sometimes the information nobody thought to give you. Salt is not your only enemy, and in many cases, it is not even your most powerful one. You deserve to know the complete picture. You deserve to understand what is actually driving your blood pressure, and not just be handed a prescription and a pamphlet telling you to watch the shaker. Now you know. You know about fructose, you know about uric acid and nitric oxide, you know about insulin and sodium retention, you know about the hidden sugars in foods that masquerade as healthy. You know about sleep and what it's doing to your arteries overnight. You know about loneliness and the very real biological harm of isolation. And you know about potassium and the balance your kidneys need to do their job. This is real information. It is evidence-based, clinically validated, and it is actionable starting today. If this video helped you see something you hadn't seen before, please subscribe to this channel right now. That single click keeps information like this reaching people who need it. And please share this with someone you love. Someone who watches their salt religiously and still can't get their numbers where they need to be. They might be one piece of information away from a breakthrough. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Your body is waiting for you to give it what it actually needs.